All right, so stamp duty.
Yep.
I liken it to the days when I was younger and fresher and going to a nightclub and having to pay the door fee.
Yep.
It's sort of that entry fee. It's your rite of passage to get in. But it's a complex topic and there's a lot of benefits and negatives with it. So, how do you help our viewers get a better understanding? What are the things they should be looking out for?
Well, the key thing is understanding stamp duty is based around what is deemed as dutiable value.
Yep.
Okay. Now, to understand dutiable value is not that hard, and we'll simplify it very carefully. When you buy a property that's completed and the contract price is, say, 600,000, that's the dutiable value.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just going to jump up to my board, my props. So those of you that have mentioned or been listening, I was very excited. So we're going to talk about dutiable value, and that's specific here to when we're talking about stamp duty and what Greg's talking about.
Yep.
So, we talk about the purchase price and then dutiable value.
Okay. Yep.
So you're saying, Greg, we've got
in something that's completed.
Yep.
The purchase price is the dutiable value.
Okay. So we say it's a $600,000 contract.
Yep.
Your dutiable value is $600,000
on which you would pay stamp duty on.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is the figure here, Greg's saying, is where you pay stamp duty.
Stamp duty, correct. And then we'll get through the various things that apply to that. Now, where you get a differentiation is where you buy something off the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Then the dutiable value is actually just the land component, not the construction. And that can be a huge advantage if you're buying something off the plan. So
tell them the numbers, Greg.
So if you bought off the plan,
yep,
and the purchase price was 600K, whatever it is, the dutiable value would only be 25% of that, circa.
So that's about 150,000.
150,000. So then you look at what the potential savings is huge.
So, in round numbers here, I've done the maths because I knew Greg was coming up with this. We're talking somewhere in the vicinity of, $33,000 in stamp duty here on $600,000. When we move to 150,000, it's about $4,000. Simple maths. I'll tell you what that equals. $29,000
of saving
in your pocket.
Yeah.
So, I think dutiable value sounds like a complicated word, Greg. In fact, you almost lost me with it. Just before this, we're arguing as to how to spell it. So I think that I've got it right. But this is really an important thing, isn't it, Greg? Because that's a huge saving.
Now, when we get into the various things, like we talked about first homeowners, they get no stamp duty up to 600,000 dutiable value.
All right, so hang on, just before we move on to that.
Yeah.
So for everyone on the line today, Greg's now going to tell you other incentives and ways that you can leverage this. But the number one thing to remember, everything sits around what we call here this dutiable value.
Yeah.
Okay, so keep that in mind.
Yep.
All right, Greg, so tell us what are the different sort of concessions and how that might pan out.
Looking at those figures, if you were a first homeowner and you bought an existing property, you would, if you didn't want to pay any stamp duty, you would look for something around 600,000 because then you would pay no stamp duty.
Okay, so a first home buyer has no stamps.
Up to 600K of dutiable value, DV.
Okay.
So if they buy an existing property, if you bought an existing property and the purchase price was that, you would pay no stamp duty. If it was over that, you'd pay that. However, that's why off the plan can be.
So straight away, you're making a saving of $30,000+
by buying. You've got that saving.
Okay.
Now this allows, because why it's a good idea for a first homeowner to sometimes look at it off the plan. You could buy something substantially bigger and more expensive and still pay no stamp duty, because we're looking at what we discussed, the dutiable value, which is quite important. So if you have a look at that there, you could potentially get a $1 million property and still no pay stamps.
So I've gone to the extreme here. Greg was being cautious.
Cautious, yeah.
But Greg explained at a $600,000 or less dutiable value as a first home buyer, you pay no stamp duty. Now, I know for most of you that are first home buyers, thinking about a $2.4 million first home is out of reach and might sound ridiculous, but this is just to give you an idea. This dutiable value, why it's so important, is that you can then go and buy something far more expensive. And if you could afford that, now don't think that many first home buyers could, you know, stamp duty on something like this is about $130,000, $140,000. Dutiable value, because you're buying off the plan, it's only $600,000. So that is a massive saving. May not be enough, I think, Greg, for most of our first home buyers to still do that.
But still, it shows you
that's the skew, isn't it?
it just shows you how important duty value is, and understanding stamps is all based around the DV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's for first home buyers.
Yep.
So obviously, regardless of any property, there's no stamp duty up to $600,000.
Yep.
There's an even bigger boost if they were to buy something off the plan, because that dutiable value sits at about 25% of your purchase price. And we've just given an extreme example.
Now the other one, so we've talked first homeowners. The other one's owner occupiers.
Yep.
So if you're a owner occupier, there's also concessions again based on dutiable value. Okay, so that's I think it's usually around about half the stamp duty if you're a owner occupier of the property, and you've already had a property before. There's still concessions if you're an owner occupier.
Okay, so for those of you that are unsure, when Greg's saying an owner occupier, basically means you're going to live in the home.
Yeah.
It's your principal place of residence, which is what most people do. So this dutiable value, Greg, that we talked about before here, and maybe just for everyone if they've just tuned in, it really only comes into play when you're buying something off the plan. Otherwise, your purchase price
is the dutiable value.
For 99% of the time, it's going to be the
dutiable value. Yep.
It's really only this quirk that we've got here in Victoria that the dutiable value is assessed on what Greg explained, the land component as it relates to an off-the-plan property.
Now, there's also been some changes over the time that originally, as an owner-occupier, you only got concessions up to $550,000. That's been extended to $1 million. So that, again, as if you're an owner-occupier, you're going to get concessions up. You can buy something up to $1 million.
Okay, so you can buy a $1 million home
and still qualify for the
off the plan. That might be only a dutiable value of $250,000.
Correct. Very little stamps again. So,
you know, in round numbers, Greg, I'll do the maths for you because I know you don't like being put on the spot. You know, we're talking about $55,000 on $1 million home. On $250,000, we're talking about $10,000. So in simple maths, that's about a $45,000 saving if you're looking to buy your next home to live in. So you don't qualify for the first home buyers. You can still leverage this concept of dutiable value if you do decide to buy an off-the-plan property.
Third one, which we wouldn't even cover, because an investor previously, if you're an investor, you pay, done. You're rich, you can afford it. There's a concession right now at the moment. If you're an investor, there's a 50% reduction in stamp duty, but let me clarify that, only in certain areas. So Melbourne, CBD and surrounds, i.e. South Bank, come and talk to us. But if you're an investor now, beforehand, even if you bought off the plan, there were no concessions. We now have this limited window where there is a 50% reduction in stamp duty, and that's huge.
And Greg, that applies to everyone. So first home buyers, owner occupiers, investors,
everything like that. So if you're a first homeowner, you'd look at the two and see where you're going to get the best savings, and you use those as but it only applies to certain areas in Melbourne. So again, first homeowners, we've talked about location and stuff. Here it is an opportunity, if it works out better, to look at the concessions and buy in one of these prime locations.
Okay. Yeah. So, Greg, I think what I'd take away from here, and hopefully for a lot of our viewers, is that stamp duty is a fact of life. There's no getting around it.
Yep.
Perhaps for those of you that are first home buyers, You might get around it for your first home, but your next home's always going to attract it.
You're going
But there are ways, and particularly what we've seen here is by buying off the
to
plan,
plan. Yep.
that you can leverage yourself in such a way that you can pay considerably less stamp duty.
Yep.
The other alternative, as you said,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be off the plan property.
Mhm.
It just has to be a brand new property, here in the council area of Melbourne. That you'll have 50% off the stamp duty.
Absolutely.
So, for example, this $1 million home we said was 55,000.
Yep.
That should come down to about 22,000. So again, you're making a substantial saving if you couldn't otherwise apply any of these
by buying into one of these prime locations. And I think you said Lucas are going to go through those details, but just, in summary, we call dutiable value is critical, but you can see how that all works out, that sometimes buying off the plan is substantially a better option because of those incentives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Greg, I just saw on the screen there's quite a few questions coming through from people. I don't think we'll get to it all.
Yep.
But as a general thought here, stamp duty 5.5%. Your advice to most people is that they need to allow for that.
Yes.
And shouldn't rely on getting these concessions.
Yes.
But obviously, if they can follow our 3 pillars, they
Yes.
probably will end up with a property that matches their criteria, that they can leverage these.
Absolutely. So you budget for it, but knowing that there are these incentives which allow you to get some additional savings that ultimately create the wealth you're looking for.
Okay. And what does the state government do with this money?
Don't start with me. don't get me political. We don't want that. We don't want that live.
All right.
So.
All right. Greg, thank you. That was good. Hopefully the prop went well and I didn't confuse you too much. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.